devil all the time. I have opinions. This movie is kind of like if someone tells you a really, really juicy story, like some real hot gossip, but they have to stop every couple seconds to give you the backstory on the people that are involved in the story. It's like you don't know these people, but you're very invested in their lives and the scandal of this very small town. Yeah, it's just so interesting. Like it's very scandalous. It's very rich in history. It feels like a very, I think in my opinion, since like I would say like Big Fish, the most like accurate to the Southern Gothic I've seen in a long time. It really just leans into the fact that this is like Southern Gothic. They lean into the fact that like this is the culture of the area, and we're going to like talk about it and make a commentary about it. Now the reason I watch this film, and I feel like a lot of people watch this film, is because this is a movie starring Tom Holland, Bill Skarsgård, Sebastian Stan, and Robert Pattinson. I was sitting here and I was like, wow, this is like every white boy of the month and they're in one movie. I'm curious to see what this is going to look like. And overall, this is a very well acted movie. Like, I cannot take much away from anybody's performance. And I think that's a credit to everyone here, because I feel like these four actors have been people that have found most of their success in these blockbuster movies, more like MCU or horror movies, like things that aren't necessarily prestige fare. And if you've seen, especially like Sebastian Stan and Bill Skarsgård and well, everyone but Tom Holland. If you've seen their work in other films, you're like, oh, they are like an actor. And I was really excited to see Tom Holland do something that wasn't Spider-Man. I feel like we literally have not seen Tom Holland in anything but Spider-Man. And I was like, alright, let's see what Tom Holland can do. And Tom Holland did okay. It was fine. I just feel like a lot of this movie, it was kind of like whenever Robert Pattinson was there, it was like, alright, Tom, step aside. I'm going to now act circles around you. I just feel like, I don't know. It was fine. It was a competent performance. I'm not really here to judge Tom Holland. He's a cool guy. The one thing that irked me about his performance, though, is that I was sitting here and I was just like, I wonder how Tom Holland's going to adjust to this Southern accent. And sometimes it was there, and sometimes it went from like Southern to Southern Spider-Man to Spider-Man, and it was so interesting. I was like, okay, you should have committed more to working on this accent. And it doesn't, and what makes him look worse is that Robert Pattinson sounds like sausage gravy on a Sunday morning, and he's definitely just committed so hard to this accent. I'm just like, wow, yeah, Robert Pattinson has just leaned into being Southern, like almost like on a Tennessee Williams level of Southernness, and I was impressed. I was really impressed. Everyone does a really good job in this movie. The only things I can detract from this movie are the script and the direction. Now, this is a good story. Like, that's the thing that's like really confusing about this movie, is that like it tells a good story. The way this works is like there's basically three plot lines going on. It's Tom Holland's like life odyssey, and then there's a subplot with Sebastian Stan's character being the sheriff of this town and him going for re-election. And then there's this other subplot about it's Sebastian Stan's sister and this serial killer, and they're just driving around and he's murdering people. First of all, that third one, that could have been its own movie. I just really would have watched that. It was very interesting. I was like, huh. So their scheme is that they pick up hitchhikers, and they're just like, where are you going? It's like, I'm going to wherever. Oh, we also happen to be going that way. The fact that people fell for that is nuts. But this is also a time before serial killers were like a thing. So I can understand how they fell for that. But, and these three stories, like you wouldn't think these three stories could easily be their own movies. But they all very skillfully blend together. But it's for a purpose. And that's where this movie kind of falls apart, is that it doesn't really make a choice as to why we're telling the story or what the message or moral of the story is. Now, spoiler warning here on out. If you want to go see Devil All the Time and have it ruined for you, this is the point where you need to stop the video, watch the movie, and come back. I'm going to be spoiling it from here on. Okay, cool, you left. So, like, we follow, like, you see from the very beginning with Bill Skarsgård that this movie is definitely about religious fanaticism. And you see that with Robert Pattinson's character, and that's like a theme throughout the whole movie. And I really like that, like, Tom Holland's character is like, yeah, I don't pray. God didn't bring my mom back from cancer, and you're not gonna shake me from that. And it was like interesting. I thought it was really interesting that this was like an anti-Pure Flix movie in the sense that, like, Tom Holland's character was like, yeah, I'm an atheist in the South, deal with it. But he was the good guy, which was really interesting. I think there's legitimately a really interesting story about how religious fanaticism, like, can go too far and how that does hurt people. But for some reason, this movie doesn't commit to making a real statement on this. Like, it just tiptoes on the line of saying this is a bad thing, but it doesn't really, like, commit to it. Additionally, how it treats female characters is horrible. So, if you see a woman in this movie, they're going to die. They're going to die. Like, that is, like, the only woman that makes it alive is Tom Holland's grandma. Like, she's the only woman that lives, and Robert Pattinson's wife. Every other woman on screen dies, which is weird, right? Like, I was just like, oh, this is so strange that every woman in this movie dies. Like, at first, it's Tom Holland's mom, and she gets cancer. So I'm like, all right, okay, that happens, you know. Cancer happens. And it kind of really propels Tom Holland's character forward. And then Enola, which is like Tom Holland's like love interest, she hangs. Okay, so Robert Pattinson like basically grooms her and has sex with her, and she gets pregnant. And you see this thing happening, and she goes out to the shed, and you're like, oh, and she's like getting a bunch of tools out this bucket. I'm like, oh, she's gonna do some type of like old timey back alley abortion. I'm like, that's what's gonna happen, and this is gonna be really sad. But no, she like hangs herself, and I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you've shown at any point, you've shown no type of like suicidal tendencies or being depressed, but you're just like, I got pregnant by the Reverend, time to hang myself. It's a weird choice, and it's weird because like, it's literally like we see her throw up from morning sickness, and she's just laying there, and she's like, and then Enola, and then the narrator's like, and Enola decided that she couldn't live like this anymore. I'm like, so she's just gonna kill herself? I'm like, they didn't do the work to make that make sense. And then she's like about to hang herself, and then the narrator's like, and Enola realized she didn't have to kill herself. I'm like, okay, thank you. Gosh, this was a little, you guys didn't do the work to establish that this makes any sense. So yeah, get off, don't do it. And then she like slips on a bucket and hangs herself accidentally. And then she still dies. And then, going back to it, Enola's mother was married to this other fanatical preacher. And the preacher stabs her in the neck and then asks God to resurrect her. And that's like completely bonkerballs. And at that moment, this happens very early in the movie. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this whole thing where we're going to show that like religious fanaticism like is very dangerous and it hurts people, but they don't commit to that. And then at the end of the movie, Sebastian Stan's sister, who's helping, in my opinion, is held hostage by this serial killer and being accomplice in the murders. Tom Holland becomes one of the hitchhikers, and Tom Holland kills the serial killer, and then she draws a gun on him. They have guns at each other, and she's like, hey, I did not kill these people. I am literally a victim in this situation. Like, let's not kill each other. And Tom Holland's like, put your gun down. And she's like, you have a gun pointed at me first, so it's gonna be a no, fam. And Tom Holland's like, I'm scared. And then he just shoots her. Like, it's just all the women in this movie just die for no reason. And also, going back to the cancer thing, like, she was extremely young. Like, they had to be in their, like, 20s. Like, mid-20s. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it was just like very out of the blue that she just got cancer and died. Yeah, so I don't get why all the women just die for no reason in this movie. And most of them in very painful and gruesome ways. Weird flex. Very weird flex. And then also there's no POC in this movie, which, like, I mean, just looking at the trailer, I was like, there's not going to be any, like, people of color in this movie. I kind of knew that. But there's, like, one native, the bouncer at the bar is Native American. I was like, okay, I will take that. There's, like, one not white person in this movie. Granted, I would like to hear his story, what's going on. And that's the whole thing about this movie, is that it spends time trying to develop 3 separate plot lines that we don't learn anything about any of these characters. Like, the only thing we know about Tom Holland is, like, every woman in his life has died a gruesome death, and now he's just living. And then none of the female characters get, like, any type of, like, details about them. Heck, Sebastian Stan is the sheriff of the town. You know what I know about him? That he's the sheriff of the town. And that's the only thing I know about him. And going back, like, Robert Pattinson's character, like, gets a little bit more detail. He's, like, the new preacher. And I guess he gets maybe more fleshed out dimensions to him. But then he has a wife, and she doesn't... First of all, I'm not even sure if we ever get a name for her. I'm not sure if she's ever formally introduced, like, this is so-and-so. I don't think she even has a name, and she's only in 2 scenes. So this movie just should have spent more time developing characters. I don't know if this is a thing with the book, and that's the question I really want to ask. I want to read the book and to see if this is just the story, or if this was like the writer-director team. They seem to be like a brother duo. The screenwriter on this is his only credit, which I think is weird. This is like he's been given this very high-profile project, but this is his only screenwriting credit. And the director, this is probably the biggest thing he's done as well. All about new people getting opportunities, but I don't know, I just feel like they didn't really make a choice here. They were just like, alright, here's the book. We're going to do everything the book says, and we're not going to add any type of our own thoughts or opinions into it. But still, I can't say that this is a bad movie. Like, it's a perfectly fine movie. Like, if you're like, I want to see some good acting, and frankly, watch a pretty good story, go ahead. Just don't expect any type of nuance or, like, amazing life discoveries from it. Like, just take yourself, sit back, grab some iced tea, and just listen to this old Southern man tell you a very juicy story. That's what you're going to get yourself into. Like and subscribe for more. Those have been my opinions.